I was sure that some trace of the ancient culture and greatness of Europe must remain. Germany, probably, would be much as it was during the 20th century, for, in common with most Pan Americans, I was positive that Germany had been victorious in the Great War. Snider demurred at the suggestion. He said that it was bad enough to have come this far. He did not want to make it worse by going to the continent. The outcome of it was that I finally lost my patience, and told him that from then on he would do what I thought best, that I proposed to assume command of the party, and that they might all consider themselves under my orders, as much so as though we were still aboard the Coldwater and in Pan American waters. Delcarte and Taylor immediately assured me that they had not for an instant assumed anything different, and that they were as ready to follow and obey me here as they would be upon the other side of 30. Snider said nothing, but he wore a sullen scowl. And I wished then, as I had before, and as I did to a much greater extent later, that fate had not decreed that he should have chanced to be a member of the launch's party upon that memorable day when last we quitted the Coldwater. Victory, who was given a voice in our councils, was all for going to the continent, or anywhere else, in fact, where she might see new sights and experience new adventures. Afterward we can come back to Great Britain, she said, and if Buckingham is not dead, and we can catch him away from his men and kill him, then I can return to my people, and we can all live in peace and happiness. She spoke of killing Buckingham with no greater concern than one might evince in the contemplated destruction of a sheep. Yet she was neither cruel nor vindictive. In fact, Victory is a very sweet and womanly woman. But human life is of small account beyond 30, a legacy from the bloody days when thousands of men perished in the trenches between the rising and the setting of a sun, when they laid them lengthwise in these same trenches and sprinkled dirt over them, when the Germans corded their corpses like wood and set fire to them, when women and children and old men were butchered, and great passenger ships were torpedoed without warning. 36, finally assured that we did not intend slaying him, was as keen to accompany us as was Victory. The crossing to the continent was uneventful, its monotony being relieved, however, by the childish delight of Victory and 36 in the novel experience of riding safely upon the bosom of the water and of being so far from land. With the possible exception of Snider, the little party appeared in the best of spirits, laughing and joking, or interestedly discussing the possibilities which the future held for us, what we should find upon the continent, and whether the inhabitants would be civilized or barbarian peoples. Victory asked me to explain the difference between the two, and when I had tried to do so as clearly as possible, she broke into a gay little laugh. "Oh," she cried, "then I am a barbarian!" I could not but laugh too, as I admitted that she was indeed a barbarian. She was not offended, taking the matter as a huge joke, but some time thereafter she sat in silence, apparently deep in thought. Finally she looked up at me, her strong white teeth gleaming behind her smiling lips. "Should you take that thing you call razor," she said, "and cut the hair from the face of 36, and exchange garments with him, you would be the barbarian, and 36 the civilized man. There is no other difference between you, except your weapons. Clothe you in a wolf-skin, give you a knife and a spear, and set you down in the woods of Great Britain, of what service would your civilization be to you?" Delcarte and Taylor smiled at her reply, but 36 and Snider laughed uproariously. I was not surprised at 36, but I thought that Snider laughed louder than the occasion warranted. As a matter of fact, Snider, it seemed to me, was taking advantage of every opportunity, however slight, to show insubordination, and I determined then that at the first real breach of discipline I should take action that would remind Snider, even after that I was still his commanding officer. I could not help but notice that his eyes were much upon Victory, and I did not like it, for I knew the type of man he was. But as it would not be necessary ever to leave the girl alone with him, I felt no apprehension for her safety. After the incident of the discussion of barbarians, I thought that Victory's manner toward me changed perceptibly. She held aloof from me, and when Snider took his turn at the wheel, sat beside him upon the pretext that she wished to learn how to steer the launch. I wondered if she had guessed the man's antipathy for me, and was seeking his company solely for the purpose of piquing me. Snider was, too, taking full advantage of his opportunity. Often he leaned toward the girl to whisper in her ear, and he laughed much, which was unusual with Snider. Of course, it was nothing at all to me, yet, for some unaccountable reason, the sight of the two of them sitting there so close to one another, and seeming to be enjoying each other's society to such a degree, irritated me tremendously, and put me in such a bad humor that I took no pleasure whatsoever in the last few hours of the crossing. We aimed to land near the site of ancient Ostend, but when we neared the coast we discovered no indication of any human habitations whatever, let alone a city. After we had landed, we found the same howling wilderness about us that we had discovered on the British Isle. There was no slightest indication that civilized man had ever set a foot upon that portion of the continent of Europe. Although I had feared as much since our experience in England, I could not but own to a feeling of marked disappointment and to the gravest fears of the future, which induced a mental depression that was in no way dissipated by the continued familiarity between Victory and Snider. I was angry with myself that I permitted that matter to affect me as it had. I did not wish to admit to myself that I was angry with this uncultured little savage, that it made the slightest difference to me what she did or what she did not do, or that I could so lower myself as to feel personal enmity toward a common sailor. And yet, to be honest, I was doing both. Finding nothing to detain us about the spot where Ostend once had stood, we set out up the coast in search of the mouth of the river Rhine, which I purposed ascending in search of civilized man. It was my intention to explore the Rhine as far up as the launch would take us. If we found no civilization there, we would return to the North Sea, continue up the coast to the Elbe, and follow that river and the canals of Berlin. Here, at least, I was sure that we should find what we sought, and if not, then all Europe had reverted to barbarism. The weather remained fine, and we made excellent progress, but everywhere along the Rhine we met with the same disappointment. No sign of civilized man. In fact, no sign of man at all. I was not enjoying the exploration of modern Europe as I had anticipated. I was unhappy. Victory seemed changed too. I had enjoyed her company at first, but since the trip across the Channel I had held aloof from her. Her chin was in the air most of the time, and yet I rather think that she regretted her friendliness with Snider, for I noticed that she avoided him entirely. He, on the contrary, emboldened by her former friendliness, sought every opportunity to be near her. I should have liked nothing better than a reasonably good excuse to punch his head. Yet, paradoxically, I was ashamed of myself for harboring him any ill will. I realized that there was something the matter with me, but I did not know what it was. Matters remained thus for several days, and we continued our journey up the Rhine. At Cologne I had hoped to find some reassuring indications, but there was no Cologne. And as there had been no other cities along the river up to that point, the devastation was infinitely greater than time alone could have wrought. Great guns, bombs, and mines must have leveled every building that man had raised, and then nature, unhindered, had covered the ghastly evidence of human